everybody, my name is Mr. Francy and welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. Okay, so today I am doing my April monthly wrap part 2, talking all the books I read in the month of April. If you would like some further insight or more elaboration on the books that I read in the first half of April, please check out my April wrap part 1, which was the most recent video that I put out there. We will go through a quick recap, however, of them, including those all-important stats on them in just a moment. But before we do, here are the overall stats for the entire month of April. My monthly stats for the month of April, here they are. So for the month of April, I read a total of 13 books, which is the first time I've read 13 books in a month this year. Holla! And they comprised of 3 fantasies, 3 cozy mysteries, 1 thriller, 1 horror, 1 mystery, 1 memoir, 1 LGBTIQ+, 1 classic, and 1 romance. I am proud of myself for mixing up my genres. I think this is the most that I've done. 9 different genres read this month. Woot woot, go Mr. Francy. Okay, to my age ranges, and I read 4 YA, 8 adult, and 1 middle grade. To my lengths, I read 1 tome and a half, 1 tome, 3 3/4 tomes, 8 half tomes, and 1 novella. So I was literally all over the board in lengths as well as genre. This is a great month for me. And I ended up reading, are you kidding me? I ended up reading a total of 3,999 pages. How does that happen? Couldn't I have just read 1 more page and then I would have gotten to 4,000 now? Well, letting that go. To my star ratings, and I had 3 5 stars, 4 4.5 stars, 2 4 stars, and 4 3 stars. So it was really all over the shop, but no 2 stars or 1 star, which I'm really happy about. But there were some rather average reads, and at the same time, there were some almost amazing or absolutely amazing books as well. So now I'm going to turn my attention to those 6 books that I mentioned already in part 1. I'm just going to give you the title, the age rating, the genre, and my star rating for them. If you want more, go ahead and check out part number 1. Alright, so the first book that I read this month was this book, The Getaway by Lamar Giles. This is a young adult horror, and I gave this book 3 stars. The next book that I read was this book, The Awakening by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti. This is book number 1 in the Zodiac Academy series. It is a new adult technically, but I call it adult fantasy, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. The next book I read was this book, The Awakening as Told by the Boys. This is technically referred to as Zodiac Academy Book 1.5. You read this book in tandem with The Awakening. So once again, it is a new adult fantasy, but I just call it an adult fantasy. And I gave that book 5 stars. The next book I read was The Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is book number 1 in the Eldest Curses duology. It is a YA fantasy, and I gave this book 5 stars. The next book I read was My Only Sunshine by M.J. Fleming. This is an adult thriller, and I gave this book 3 stars. And the last book I spoke about in part 1 was this book, Neverworld Wake by Marisha Pessel. This is a young adult mystery, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. So those are the, is it 6 or is it 5? The 6 books that I spoke about in part 1. I have 7 books to speak about here in part 2. So now that you're caught up, let's discuss the rest of the books that I read in April 2023. So the next book that I read was this book, Apple Cider Slaying, which is book number 1 in the Cider Shop Mystery series by Julie Ann Lindsay. This is an adult cozy mystery book, and I gave this book 3 stars. So the premise of this book is that we follow Winnie, who is working with her grandmother at her apple orchard. Winnie has always wanted to open her own cider shop, but needs the bank's funding to do so. However, when the bank comes out to take a look around, He and Winnie find more than they bargained for. Winnie's next-door neighbor and enemy of her grandmother is found dead, and Winnie's grandmother is the #1 suspect. Winnie sets out to do what she can to find the real killer and get her grandmother off the suspect list. So to my thoughts, and honestly, the first half was just not for me at all. I've decided I'm going to be more picky with cozies from now on. The subject matter of the cozy side needs to intrigue me, and in all honesty, apples and cider don't. But the second half was really entertaining, so despite considering DNFing early on, I'd very much love to continue on with my journey. I do see similarities between Christmas Tree Farm, which is the cozy mystery series that Julianne Lindsay writes under the pen name Jacqueline Frost, and this one, but there's enough of a difference for them to just be seen as Julie and Lindsay isms. It was a great start to the series, and I'm looking forward to reading book number 2. Without giving away too much of a spoiler, the first half of the book focuses on an apple orchard. The second half of the book focuses on an apple cider shop prospect. And the cider shop side does intrigue me more. The apple orchard side does not intrigue me one iota. So the fact that we ended with that and that the series title is Apple Cider Shop, not Apple Orchard Farm, intrigues me a whole lot more. So whilst I gave this one 3 stars and felt that it was an average read for me, I am still excited to get on to book number 2 and see how the series will grow for me over the course of time. But 3 stars for me for this one. So the next book that I read was this book, Crime and Poetry by Amanda Flower. This is book number 1 in the Magical Bookshop Mystery series, and I gave this book 4 stars. It is an adult cozy mystery as well. Okay, so I was very excited going into this book because it's Amanda Flower. Last year I read Amish Matchmaker, the first 3 books, and I also was completely up to date with that series, but I also got completely up to date, including novellas, on the Amish Candy Shop series. Can't wait for Blueberry Blunder, by the way, coming out very soon. So I wanted to read 2 more Amanda Flower series this year. So I will be continuing on with my reading journey of the Magic Garden mystery series. Had to think about that one for a second. But this month I started her second series I'm working on for her this year, which is the Magical Bookshop mystery series. And this is book 1, Crime and Poetry. So the premise of this book is that we follow Violet, who rushes back home to Cascade Springs to her grandmother's bookstore, Charming Books, which, by the way, that name for that bookstore is quintessential Amanda Flower. And Violet does this because her grandmother has told her she is dying. Turns out this was a lie. Her grandmother wants her back home in Cascade Springs to help her run the bookstore. But there's a magical secret to these books. They speak to me, her grandmother says. What? Violet asks. What indeed? We then meet a man that her grandmother likes, who ends up buying a book to do with death, and the following morning he is found outside her grandmother's home dead. With her grandmother being the #1 suspect, Violet sets out to determine who the real killer is. So to my thoughts on this book, and truly, truly loved this book. Honestly, the only reason it got 4 stars instead of 5 is because I worked out the reveal way too soon. It was less of a go me moment and more of a finally I've been waiting for this reveal from the beginning moment. But believe me when I say I'm only harsh on Amanda Flower here because of how much I love her as an author, and the rest of the book did not let me down at all. I've begun to notice that Amanda Flower always has one or more animal companion or companions in every book she writes, and in this one we have a cat named Emerson and a big black bird named Faulkner. Her animals never fail to delight, and the sass of Faulkner and the cuteness of Emerson were a real plus to the story. The magic system was really good for a cozy, and all in all, I grew to love the book so much. Last year I loved Amish Candy Shop and liked Amish Matchmaker. This year I think I love this series and like Magic Garden. Praise to dear Amanda Flower. As with my dear, dear, dear Mr. Brando Sando, I look forward to the day when I've read all of Amanda Flower's works. 4 stars from me. So the next book that I read was this book, Death of a Christmas Caterer by Lee Hollis. This is book number 5 in the Haley Powell Food and Cocktail Mystery series, and I gave this book a total of 4.5 stars. So the premise of this book is that Haley is given a promotion as an office manager and is tasked with running the Christmas party. Haley wants to hire Gareth, a gourmet cook, to do the catering, but when he sees her budget, he decides not to do it. Not too much later, Gareth is found dead on the floor of his kitchen. It's a head scratcher as all the doors were locked and Gareth is known for not giving anyone a key. So did he die of natural causes or was it murder? So to my thoughts, this book was so much better than book number 4. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, but if you've just joined me, if you've just tuned in to Mr. Francy Reads, Mr. Francy loved book 1, 2, and 3 in this series, and then book 4 took an absolute nosedive. Book number 5, this book was going to do one of two things. That nosedive was going to turn into an absolute crash and I would DNF the series, or the pilot of the plane, which is Lee and Hollis, they would have found a way to use that joystick thingy that you use in a plane. Trying to do a metaphor about planes, and I'm not really interested in planes, but anyway, you know what I mean. And they'll set the nose right again and go way back up in the air, and everything is all happy. Did that metaphor work? You let me know in the comments below. But anyway, it did. The plane survived the crash. This book was so much better than book number 4. I am so happy because I loved, as I said, books 1, 2, and 3, and I had told everyone within the sound of my voice, if this book sucks, I am DNFing this series. I don't care. After the love I had for book 1, 2, and 3. But book 5 bounced back so well. So the cozy side was filled with Christmas cheer and I enjoyed that so much. The mystery side took me a bit to get into though, hence I gave it a 0.5 star deduction. But honestly though, this book was the one that would determine to say if I kept going or not, and it was just so fantastic. I cannot wait to continue on, and I'm looking forward to reading the next book, which I do not remember what the next book is called, but I do have it on my Made TBR, so I'm looking forward to reading book 6, which has poodles on the cover. As my dear Mama Francy keeps reminding me, because she's about to reading this series with me, as people over on the Discord. So please, again, if you'd like to join us, click on the link. It's in the description. Join us on the Discord. We're reading one of these books every single month this year, provided I don't DNF. And Mama Francy is a part of it, and she keeps telling me she's really excited for book number 6 because there are so many little poodles on the cover. But anyway, I thought it was fantastic. A great way for Lee and Hollis to bounce back. 4.5 stars from me. So the next book that I read was this book, Behind the Voice by Anthony Kalia. This is an adult memoir, and I gave this book an overwhelming 5 stars. So in this memoir, Anthony Kalia details moments throughout his life, sharing in each and every detail that is his to tell. Anthony Kalia, for those of you who don't know, I feel like I've spoken about him so many times on this channel, but in case you're new or you haven't heard of him before, Anthony Kalia was on season 2 of Australian Idol, where he made it to the final 2 and was runner-up to eventual winner Casey Donovan. Anthony Kalia, post-Idol, has done a lot for a lot of people. He is a very charitable man that definitely does lead with his heart, and he came out of the closet not too much later after Idol. He was kind of, I don't know, forced out of the closet. It was a sad story. It's in the book, so feel free to give it a read. It will tell you exactly how that happened. But he was forced out of the closet, and then since then, his life really started to turn around into an amazing direction. He married his husband, Tim Campbell. They actually went overseas to New Zealand to get married because at the time in Australia, gay marriage was illegal, or, well, not recognised, or whatever you want to call it. Times have changed since then. Fortunately, 2 guys, if they want to get married, now can. Woot woot. Shout out to whoever my future fiancé may be. that we can actually get married now. But yeah, they did that, and then they came back here, and Anthony just did so much for the LGBTIQ plus community, as well as being the ambassador for Vision Australia, which is a charity that helps children that have issues when it comes to sight and things like that. And yeah, he's just an all-round fantastic guy, but he's gone through so many ups and downs, and he details them all in this book, being incredibly real and incredibly raw, which I appreciated. So this book was pure gold for me. I've always loved reading memoirs, and think that's because I'm particularly specific when it comes to the memoirs I choose to read. I only ever read memoirs of those I actually have a deep interest in wanting to learn more about. And what sets Behind the Voice apart from many other memoirs I've read is just how raw and real it is. Anthony, while admittedly nervous to publish this book, doesn't shy away from delving into the darkest moments of his life, whilst also joyously celebrating every moment, lesson, and experience. My only wish was that the book was longer, as I'm sad now that it's done and I have no more left to read. I hope Anthony, as others like Lauren Graham did, comes out with a second memoir, maybe of things we don't know yet, things that he wasn't able to discuss in this one for one reason or another. Praise to Anthony Kalia, what a great guy. It was a fantastic read. I highly recommend it. 5 stars from me. So the next book I read was this book, Always and Forever, Lara Jean by Jenny Han. This is a YA romance, and I gave this book 3 stars. This is also the third and final book in the To All the Boys I Loved Before trilogy, which means I have another series that I can cross off of my SAS list. I am thrilled to be able to cross off another series on my SAS list. I may not sound it, but I truly am. I love any time I get to cross a list off and say, yay, I completed another SAS list. So on that side of things, I'm really, really happy I got to cross another series off my SAS list. But all in all, I wasn't the biggest fan of this trilogy, and this book probably got the lowest rating from me. I'd have to go back and check, but it probably did, which is an unpopular opinion because book 1, at the very least, To All the Boys I Loved Before, was so incredibly popular that it was adapted into a film on Netflix. So, I mean, obviously enough people loved it for that to happen, but for me, I found it very underwhelming. I found the series overall to be very average. I will still do a CSL, completed SAS list review of the series, and talk more about it over there. But just overall, my initial thoughts are, I found it to be a very average read, the entire series. But to this book anyway, the premise of this book is that Lara Jean has applied to college and has a plan mapped out for her and her boyfriend. He's already been accepted into college via early admittance. Now she just needs to be accepted. But when she is outright rejected, not even put on the wait list, what will she do, and how will this affect her and her relationship? So to my thoughts, I liked seeing the genuine heart and head struggle between what's best for a relationship, heart, versus what's best for your education, head, a lot. But otherwise, this book for me was just a way to wrap up the series. Because we were dealing with college acceptance letters right off the bat, it felt like the end of the series at the beginning of the book, and therefore it felt like it just dragged things out from there. I'm not saying it's a bad book, not at all, just saying it didn't work for me. The ending was incredibly abrupt also, in my opinion. However, I did like how everything wrapped up. It was a solid 3-star book. Yeah, so an average rating. And yeah, just to reiterate that, I'm not saying that it's a horrible series. Definitely not. If it was horrible, trust me, you would know, because I would make the point. This is horrible, and let me tell you why. It was just more that it was disappointing because I found it to be an average read. Not only the series overall, but even more specifically this book, I found to just be very average. So 3 stars from me. No hate to anyone who loves it. If you want to read it, give it a go. You might like it. It just wasn't for me. So the next book that I read was this book, Never Been Kissed by Timothy Janowski. Apparently, this is book number 1 in the Boy Meets Boy series. I'm here to provide a rebuttal. To me, this is a standalone. I read another Timothy Janowski book, You're a Mean One, Matthew Prince, and apparently that's book number 2 in this series. No, I disagree. They're both standalones because they're both completely different. They don't relate in any way, shape, or form. So to me, it's a standalone. In saying that, the standalone is a new adult romance, or if I were to round it up or round it down from new adult, I would call this one young adult because it's much more young adult than it is adult. So any kind of adult theme does not take place in this book at all. Now, that is nothing against Timothy Janowski. I end up giving this book 4.5 stars. It got a very solid rating from me and it deserved it. It's just that I would have just slapped the sticker of young adult on it and called it a day, but apparently the publishing company decided to call it new adult, and I think that's because at the beginning of the book we follow our protagonist, whose name is Ren, who is graduating from high school and going on to do what's next. So he's right in that transition, going from being a teenager to being an adult, and that's fine, but the overall theme of the book to me more read like a YA than a new adult or an adult book. Alright, on to the premise. So in this book we follow Ren, who, as the title suggests, has never been kissed. He's had moments of near kisses, but never crossed the final frontier. One night, after a whole lot of drinking, Ren sends some drunken emails off to all the boys he's almost kissed, letting them know how all of this made him feel, as he feels they are to blame. Not too much later, Ren is at a restaurant where he spies Derek, the man whose near kiss with him hurts Ren the most. Derek is then hired to work at the drive-in company where Ren works as a newly promoted manager. How will they move forward considering their past and the email? Honestly, it was a rough start for me, but I think that's because as a new adult book, I found it hard to buy that the romance side revolved around a man who had never been kissed. Not saying it can't happen, it's just not as believable. In saying that, I grew to love Ren the more I got to know him, and I fell very quickly for Derek too. It was a great male-male romance, and I do highly recommend it, and I can't wait to see New Adult, which is the title of Timothy Janowski's next book, once it is released. So I gave it 4.5 stars, deducting 0.5 stars for the rough beginning. Yeah, so I liked it. I say go into this book expecting it to be a YA male-male romance, and I think you'll have a good time. Yeah. I thought it was great. 4.5 stars from me, and Timothy Janowski is fast becoming an author for me. So the final book I read this month was this book, The Horse and His Boy by C.S. Lewis. This is a middle grade classic and is book number 3 in the Chronicles of Narnia series, which we are buddy reading over on my Discord. Again, link in the description below. We're reading 1 book a month for this one, and I gave this book 4 stars. So in this particular book, we are following Shasta, which, by the way, I love that name. Oh my gosh, you come across so many names that keep getting repeated because they're common names that all these authors use. And then C.S. Lewis, who wrote this so long ago, came up with Shasta, and Shasta has never been used again in my reading experience. If you've read a book where the character's name is Shasta and it's not this book, let me know. I want to read it just for the sake of how different the name is. But anyway, doesn't matter. We follow Shasta, who is an adopted son of a very mean fisherman. One night, Shasta overhears his adoptive father and another man discussing the sale of Shasta. So Shasta decides to run away. Before he does, he comes upon the horse of the man that would purchase him and comes to find out this horse can talk. The horse's name is Bree, and Bree tells Shasta he was from Narnia and that's why he can talk. At once, both feel that they can benefit from each other's company, and so they travel on a quest to get to Narnia. But their travel won't be easy, and how will they manage the obstacles they face? Only time will tell. Now, I must admit I was a little let down by the lack of characters we're all used to. This book more connects to the world of Narnia than sticks to the story we're following from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But in saying that, I love the interactions between the horse and his boy, and the ending was a lot of fun too. I just think that when I read a series, and I'm growing more, you know, this is my 3rd year on BookTube of reading many, many, many books, and I am constantly learning things the more I read books. But one thing I've come to learn when it comes to series is A series is a series because all of the books in that series will connect in some way. Some way, no matter how tiny, in some way they will connect, versus what I used to think, which was a series is a set of books that continue the same plot with the same characters in each subsequent book. And that used to really annoy me. I've read some amazing, especially male romance first books in series, and then found out that the second book has completely different characters and been so turned off that I haven't picked it up. But now I'm starting to accept that more, and that is actually thanks to Ian Robb Wright. I have one more book left to read to complete his Damien Verse series, and each book in that series contains completely different characters, where there might be minor characters that show up here and there, but otherwise completely different characters and completely different scenarios that connect in a very minor and subtle way. And so I'm growing, people. I'm learning. I'm growing. And honestly, I'm actually starting to appreciate this idea of series more, because it expands on the universe that we are involved in. So rather than just following along in a two-dimensional way, the same characters over and over again as their story progresses throughout each and every book in that series, we go from a certain set of characters to a completely other set of characters that connect in some way to another set of characters, and it just expands that world. And that's what we have here. This is book number 3 in the Chronicles of Narnia series. Book number 3 in the Chronicles of Narnia series, and yet we are not following the same characters we followed in book 2, which was Edmond and Lucy and Peter and Susan. Had to think there. Instead, we're following Shasta, which was great. I really appreciate it. Now, I have to tell you all something. If you've been following me for a long time, you know that Mr. Francy's least favorite trope of all time is, can you guess before I say it? Let's see if you were right. Is the traveling/questing trope where you don't know where you're going and you don't know how to get there. And that asterisk always needs to be there, because in this book we deal with the traveling/questing trope, but a massive, huge interjection here. We do know where we're going and we do know how to get there, and I did actually enjoy it. So I don't like heedless travel. But if you need to go from point A to point B and it's going to take some time, but you know how to get there, I am on board with you. But if you have no idea where you're going, you're just stumbling around in the dark, I mean, that I don't like. But this was fantastic. I love talking animals, so if you're not a fan of that, you may not like this book, but the horse talks, and I loved that. And it's very Narnia, because the animals in Narnia, in case you don't know, they talk. I don't think that's too much of a spoiler. I really enjoyed this. I think a lot of people did not enjoy this book from what I've seen on Goodreads reviews, did not enjoy it because they wanted Peter and Susan and the others to be in this book. It's not to say they're not. I will say this, without spoiling anything else, they do feature in the book. They're just a very, very, very minor part of the book. But I actually didn't mind it because it allowed the world of Narnia to expand from what we already know. So I gave it a solid 4 stars. I loved it. And I'm very much looking forward to reading book number 4 next month. And now we picture me holding up all the books that I've read this month and saying the following line. Now for everyone's favourite game that we like to call Up. These are all the books that I read in the month of April 2023. What books did you read in the month of April 2023? Let me know in the comments section below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it, letting you all go with peace, blessings, and so much love. Please do be kind and love one another and spread your sparkling energy all throughout the world. And until next time, happy reading. Bye everyone.